Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Tanya, aka Monarch on the trails, and this is Zobi, who I'm sorry is a little bit anxious right now because it is starting to storm. He doesn't like that. Amazing that on the AT, I'm gonna set him down. Amazing that on the AT, this little guy hiked the whole thing, which is what we're gonna talk about in this video. And through storms. He doesn't like storms, but now here we are in the safety of my RV. It's starting to storm and he's acting like, you know, the world's about to cave in on him. This is probably the most requested video that I have received in my series of frequently asked questions and tips and advice for through hiking the Appalachian Trail. That is through hiking the Appalachian Trail with a dog. Now, obviously, as you could see, oh baby, he's shaking. Oh, why are you scared of storms again all of a sudden? As you can see, I through hiked with a small dog. He's a little fluffy at the moment. He needs to get groomed, but he only weighs about 5 to 6 pounds. He was 5 pounds when we started the trail and 6 pounds when he finished. I think he gained a little bit of muscle on the trail. Or he just ate a lot like his mommy did, because I gained weight too. So I am going to have tips and advice on the logistics in general of through hiking with a dog, and then I'm going to speak from my own advice of through hiking with a small dog. I will give as much advice as I can from what I saw on trail with other people who were hiking with medium to large dogs, but that's not my personal experience, so I may not be able to provide you with the best resources, but I'll do my best that I can. I have 10 points to discuss on the logistics of through hiking, specifically the Appalachian Trail with a dog. Some of these, the first several, are more general towards just through hiking with a dog, and then it gets more specific to the actual Appalachian Trail and things that you're going to encounter. I'm going to do a whole separate video on gear and my personal opinion on some of the gear that I brought and used that I highly recommend, or maybe you could get away without doing. Things that I didn't have to bring necessarily because I have a smaller dog, and then things that I did have to bring because I have a smaller dog. So that's going to be a whole separate video. I will reference that in this video and try to get both of these uploaded around the same time to be able to cross-reference with one another. Okay, here we go. Point number 1 in through hiking with a dog. You are no longer hiking your own hike, you are hiking your dog's hike. If you aren't able to adjust to that, then leave your dog at home. There's a huge difference between going on a day hike with your dog and going on a 6-month through hike with your dog. You are increasing your mileage yourself, and if your dog can't increase that mileage, then you are going to have to back off on your mileage and hike what your dog's allowance is in miles per day. You need to know your dog's capabilities. Is your dog afraid of going over ladders and rungs and going across rushing rivers? How does your dog interact with wildlife, which is another thing that we're going to talk about later? How does your dog do... I don't want to... This is going to be my last point. I'm going to bring it back to this at the end, but how does your dog do with recall? Don't hike with your dog off leash. That's going to be my last point. I'm giving you a preview of that. But there are going to be some areas on the AT where you kind of just have to take your dog off leash because it's so steep. The rock scrambles are so high, or so it's too dangerous for both of you to be tethered together. So in those instances, if you have a dog who has a tendency when they're off leash to take off, then, I mean, you should already know. I mean, you shouldn't even be thinking about through hiking with a dog unless you're going to be keeping that dog on leash. So you have to hike your dog's hike, know their abilities, be prepared to stop early, cut your mileage. That may also mean that you lose family members, people, you know, the social aspect of the trail and the relationship that you're building. Not everyone is going to be willing to stop when you need to stop because of your dog. You may need to, you know, get off trail because the dog is injured. Just like when you get injured, maybe the dog needs a couple of zeros. You may make a vet appointment. You may just need to cut your miles because you can do 20-mile days, but your dog can only do 12 to 15. So you just have to absolutely be prepared for that. You need to be prepared with a backup plan for hiking your dog's hike. Either you're going to hike your dog's hike all the way from Georgia to Maine, or if your dog has to get off trail, you have to be willing to get off trail with it. Or the backup plan of someone who loves your dog and that you trust and is able to watch your dog for the remaining 3 months, 2 months, however many months you might have left on trail, and do a gut check. Are you able to get back on trail without your dog and finish this? How does that change your experience and what you wanted to get out of your hike on the Appalachian Trail? Okay, point number 2. You have to budget extra to bring a dog on a thru hike. So there are a lot of different areas where dogs may or may not be allowed. And if they are allowed, it's probably going to be an extra fee. This is where I'm going to talk about something that honestly I might do an entirely separate video regarding. It's a shorter video, but there's so much to talk about. I don't want to take up like 10 minutes right now. So all I'm going to say is if your dog is a service animal, and by that I mean an ADA recognized service animal that is helping you with a disability, whether that is physical or psychiatric, and you have all of the proper equipment and training for your dog to be a service animal, then your dog is allowed everywhere. And legally, even hotels are not supposed to charge you any type of a service fee for a service animal that has a right to be with you. This is not an emotional support animal. You may have an emotional support animal, but you have to recognize that that doesn't give you allowance into certain areas. I'm thinking of the national parks that in Baxter State Park that dogs are not allowed, the huts in the that are controlled by the AMC in New Hampshire, some hostels, shuttles, hotels. So some people are considered, this is more of an individual. I'm not talking about a nationally registered area like the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I'm talking about like individual hostel owners may consider an emotional support animal to be a service animal and allow you without any extra fee, or you don't have to have a private room or something like that. So back to the budgeting extra. I'm talking to people who don't have service animals here. So budgeting extra, you are more than likely going to always have to get a private room at a hostel. If the hostel will even take dogs. Otherwise, you may have to tent outside with your dog, and you will be allowed to use like their shower and laundry and things like that within the hostel, but you can't take your dog inside, which you don't have to budget extra for that actually, because tenting is least expensive. But if you want to be inside and you want a room, you have to budget extra for a private room. Hotels, most hotels charge anywhere from $25 to $200 extra to have a dog in your room. Shuttle drivers, some shuttle drivers will not take dogs. They don't care if it is, I mean, service animal, again, they have to, but they don't care if it is hypoallergenic, doesn't shed, can sit in your lap. Like I had one driver, it was actually an Uber that we called, and it did even the pet Uber option. And he pulled up, saw my little dog who is hypoallergenic and sits in my lap, I can hold him in my arms, and he rolled his window up and drove away. Wouldn't even talk to me, like wouldn't take him at all. So we had to call another Uber. That was when I was getting off trail for poison ivy. So another thing is you're probably gonna have to get off trail over the course of 6 months for at least one grooming appointment, if not 2. Their nails actually do a pretty good job of staying sharp. I want to use the word sharpened. Down, ground, the stones grind them down is what I'm really poorly trying to say here. I did take Zobi in and have his nails clipped about halfway through. And she even said, she's like, I'm going to do it, but they're really not too bad. And then when we got to Maine and we only had a few weeks left, I wanted to get it done again. And we had to take him to a vet. Here's another extra budget thing. I had an emergency where I needed to take him to the vet because he had an eye infection. And the vet asked him to go ahead and, do his nails. And the vet was like, his nails are fine. Like the rocks in New Hampshire must have ground him down enough like that we don't need to do them. So grooming, vet appointments, and all the other things that I talked about where you need to know that you have to budget extra. Okay. Number 3. Know that you are going to be carrying extra weight in your pack for your dog's gear. And again, I'm going to do a whole separate gear video. So this is where you get into in determining your gear that you're going to purchase, how much space is left, actually physical volume space is left for your dog's gear, as well as how much space allotment in like your maximum amount of weight that you want to carry when fully loaded with 4 to 5 days of food and a couple liters of water. In the summertime, you are going to have water carries, and that means you're going to have water carries for your dog, and water is heavy. you're also going to have to carry your dog's food. Now, if you have a larger dog, here's where the small versus large dog animal starts to come into play. A lot of people who had larger dogs on trail did have those packs that went over their dog's back that they could carry some of their own gear. Now, they say not to exceed about 10% of your dog's body weight. Well, Zobi weighs 5 pounds. Like, he would have been carrying like kibble, if even that, like a little, like a day's worth of it or something. So yes, your dog can carry some of their own gear. I don't know how much you know your dog. You need to practice with your dog wearing the harness and the vest and having weight in it, but more than likely you are going to be carrying your dog's water. Another thing when it comes to water with water carries and being heavier weight is some people would not allow their dogs to drink from the streams and rivers on the trail. They filtered their dog's water as well, which meant they were carrying more water, or their dog was having to go longer stretches until they got to the next stream, wait for their owner to gather and filter water so they could drink. Now, Zobi has an iron stomach, I swear. The dog like literally eats crazy things and doesn't get sick. So I wasn't worried about it. In Georgia, I was a little antsy at first, but he seemed to be fine. And all the way through to Maine, he was fine. I let him drink from the strings. He freaking drank mud puddles. I'm not even kidding. Like, there were a few times I was like, no, Zoe, don't drink that. But that is something you need to consider. So, you're going to be carrying your dog's gear. And in my gear video, your dog needs a sleeping bag. All the gear that you have, your dog needs. Your dog needs a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, some sort of rain gear, some sort of a coat, some sort of dry clothes to change into, probably maybe their own blanket and or towel. And then again, we get into food and water. So for me with food, in the end, I wound up just feeding Zobi extra of my own food. I just bought some extra food that I knew he liked. And again, he eats like everything. He ate everything from Belvita and Little Debbie's and Doritos to, you know, beef jerky and ice cream. So like in the end, he wouldn't even eat his dog food anymore. By the time we got to Virginia, I left what dog food I was carrying at a hostel that had dogs and was like, here you go. I'm just going to start feeding him people food. And he was fine the rest of the way to Maine. But you need to know that you're going to have extra weight in his food, his water, his or her food, water, carrier. Okay, so we'll talk about carriers real quick. I'm going to get more into detail on this in the gear. I carried a front-facing carrier that I did carry Zobi in the worst of weather. He hiked the vast majority of the trail himself. But when it was consistently rainy and cold or snowy and cold, I did carry him just because I was afraid of him getting sick from getting cold or getting, hypothermia. Dogs get hypothermia too. And Zobi tends to get cold rather easily. So large dogs, you definitely need to have that rescue harness. The thing with this that I don't know how someone with a large dog is going to be able to figure out, and this is where hopefully having a really good Tramily member or someone you're hiking with from the beginning can maybe help you with this, because if the case, in the case that you need to carry your dog, those rescue harnesses are designed to go over your back. And I don't know how you do that and have your backpack unless you can somehow figure out to put the harness or the pack on the front of you. And then you have front and back. But yeah, you need to be able to carry your dog, whether it is a small dog or a large dog. Okay, so that was a lot of talk on the first 3 points, but there are, a lot of things that are logistic in general things about through hiking with a dog that you've got to consider. And those may be some of your make or break decisions before we even get into some of these other details. Okay, so number 4, critters. One of the biggest problems for both humans and animals on the AT is ticks. So you absolutely need to double, triple, even quadruple up on your tick protection and your dog's tick protection. So what I did for Zobi and myself, I treated everything with permethrin. Absolutely anything that could get permethrin on it, all of my gear, all of my clothing, Zobi's clothing, everything I treated with permethrin, and I was very good about repeating the treatments while on trail. I then also there's a wonderful product called Wondercide. It's all natural and plant-based, so you can put it on the exterior of your dog. Permethrin you're not supposed to put on the exterior of your dog. They do make a dog-friendly permethrin now, by the way. They sell it at Walmart, but I used Wondercide. I've been using it for years. I actually use it for the application inside my RV as well. And so I brought a little 2-ounce bottle of that with me, and then I had a bigger bottle that was sent to me to refill, but I actually only had to I was fine. The 2 ounces lasted, because he's a small dog, the 2 ounces lasted most of the trail. A bigger dog, you're going to need to probably continually buy some sort of exterior application to put actually on them after you give them baths, or if they go running around in the rivers or something and get wet. You got to keep that exterior application. So permethrin, Wondercide, a flea and tick collar that has permethrin in it. And then the last thing was I had Zobi on Bravecto, which is a internal drug that you give every 3 months. It lasts for 90 days. So for a 6-month through hike, you can order it like just in 1 tablet at a time. I ordered 2 tablets and gave it to him at the beginning and halfway through, and I was done in 6 months and 5 days, and he was covered. So I quadrupled up: permethrin, Wondercide, flea and tick collar, and the Bravecto on the inside. Other critters that you need to be concerned about, snakes. That was one of my biggest fears. Zobi, thankfully, is not the type of dog who goes after critters. He's not, the super curious one who's, biting and nosing around with squirrels and chipmunks and toads and snakes. So I wasn't worried about Zobi going after them. I was worried about just, stumbling upon one on the trail. I don't see it, Zobi doesn't see it, and it strikes. That's a very real fear and is something that can happen on the AT. There are a lot of copperheads and a lot of rattlesnakes. Amazingly, I only saw 2 copperheads on trail and no rattlesnakes the entire trail. I did see a couple of copperheads like on cliff rock overlooks where there were views, like little blue blazes off the trail to an overlook. So you have to be just very, very diligent on where you're looking. And if possible, what I was fortunate enough to be able to have in my world was a tramily that hiked ahead of me and were like my snake sweepers. So the 2 times that we did come across a copperhead, Stan got the copperhead off of the trail, and Zobi, honestly, I don't even think realized there was anything going on. To him, we just paused and took a little break and then kept going. But you need to be prepared for that. So kind of back to the gear is, I know some dog owners were hiking with snake bite kits. I hiked with this little tube thingy that you can pull venom, supposedly you can pull venom out of a snake bite. Thankfully, I never had to test it, so I don't know if it actually works. So yeah, critters, ticks and snakes being the big ones that you have to be concerned about. All right, number 5. Kind of already talked about this, but be prepared to carry your dog. So again, back to the dog emergency sling carrier, not just for emergencies. Well, there are other areas where you may need to be prepared to carry your dog or lift it up or lift it down, because there are some really steep rock scrambles or areas where the only way up and down is a rebar ladder. And in Vermont, there's actually even like a real metal extension ladder attached to a big rock face that is an actual ladder to go down. So you have to figure out. Now, dogs, amazingly, my caveat to this is Zobi shocked the crap out of me that not only did he learn how to go up and down ladders and rebar completely on his own without any of my help, but where there were some of these areas that was difficult for us 2-legged humans to figure out how to get up and down were easier for the 4-legged canines. We joked around that Zobi was like a mountain goat. Well, a lot of dogs have that ability where a rock scramble or a surface that's too steep for us, like they just scramble right up it. So you may think like some of these areas like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get my dog up or down this? And then your dog figures it out on their own and you don't even have to worry about it. But I'm going to preface this and put this as a point in that you do need to be prepared to carry your dog. Mahoosuc Notch, the ladders, the rebars through Maine, especially the whites, New Hampshire, and there's some rebar in New York. And then even down in the Smokies, there's some scramble and time of year. It can be icy. When I went through the Smokies, it was pure ice. Your dog's not allowed in the Smokies unless it's a service dog, but around the Smokies before and after is a lot of the same stuff. There's bouldering, some rock scrambling, and it can be very icy. So just need to be prepared to carry your dog as well. All right, point number 6. We're on number 6 now. Speaking of the Smokies, dogs are not allowed in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. There is another national park you go through, Shenandoah. Dogs are allowed in Shenandoah. And interestingly enough, Shenandoah is actually where you usually see more wildlife. Again, unless you have a service dog, your dog is not allowed in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. But there are, I'm aware of 2 Maine kennels that are options who will take your dog prior to the Smokies and then deliver them to you after the Smokies. One of them is Standing Bear, which is actually a hostel after the Smokies that many people stay at when they finish the Smokies. They do have a kennel service. I'm not sure how you get your arrangements to get your dog to them before the Smokies because I didn't use them. And I'm just going to be really real here. The reason I didn't use Standing Bear or stay at Standing Bear was because they get a lot of negative reviews. And I'm just putting that out there because you can do your own research and you'll see. Hopefully that has changed. But a year ago when I was researching all of this, it was very, very consistent in all of my thru-hiker dog forums and groups. A personal friend of mine who had stayed there, everyone was saying that it was a negative experience with the kennel. So I chose to use one that got very good reviews, and that I personally highly recommend, is Loving Care Kennel in Pigeon Forge. Is owned by Jerica and Aaron, and Jerica was wonderful. I was very, very anxious about boarding Zobi because I have never boarded him before, ever. I've only been away from him for 3 days, and friends or family have watched him if I've gone on like 3-day weekends. Anything longer than that, I've taken him with me. So I was probably more anxious and had separation anxiety than Zobi did about being kenneled in the Smokies. Jericho was wonderful. She took my call, answered all my questions, walked me through the process. She drove to Fontana Village where we were staying before we got into the Smokies, picked Zobi up. I gave her, food, medicine, anything that she needed. And then I had 7 nights, 8 days, 7 nights is what the max is that the Loving Care Kennel will watch for you. And you probably don't need that long to get through the Smokies. I did it in 5.5 days, got through the Smokies, and then Jerica met me on the other side at Davenport Gap with Zobi. Happy reunion right there on trail. I had a shuttle driver pick me up, and I went into Newport, Tennessee for my 0, and we went on together from there. So it's not really that big of a deal to have to kennel your dog through the Smokies, and Loving Care makes it very easy, very reasonable price. And she also even brought me my my own resupply before and after the Smokies as well. So that was pretty awesome. All right, so that's number 6, the Smokies. Number 7 is Baxter and Katahdin. Again, unless it's a service dog, I feel like I'm a broken record there, dogs are not allowed in Baxter, and they are very anal about this. You come out of the 100-mile wilderness and you arrive at A-Ball Bridge. There's a general store and A-Ball Bridge campground. Now, you are allowed with a dog at that area. So if you need to camp at the A-Ball Bridge campgrounds, you can camp there with a dog. Just past that, only like maybe a 1/4 mile past that, is the actual boundary to Baxter State Park on the AT, and then your dog is not allowed. So there are a couple options. If you have friends or family meeting you in Maine, which a lot of people do, you may be able to make arrangements for your friend to watch your dog for you while you hike through Baxter and hike up Katahdin if they're not actually hiking with you. What we ended up doing was we got off at A-Ball Bridge, went into Millinocket, got an Airbnb, and I got a rental car. In the meantime, Stan's daughters actually rearranged their schedules kind of at the last minute, and they were able to meet us in Maine, which was wonderful. We had a little celebration for Zobi at A-Ball Bridge because he'd gone as far as he could go and completed his thru-hike. And they actually drove us into Millinocket to our Airbnb and then drove me into Bangor. I decided to get a rental car because of my situation on getting home afterwards. Stan drove home with his daughters. I got a rental car. And then between them and my rental car, we were able to go back and forth to Baxter, leave the dog at the Airbnb or with them, and that's how we made our arrangements. So if you have friends or family coming, that's a great option. Rental cars, their cars, and Airbnb or hotel in Millinocket. There is a hostel in Millinocket that I believe does allow dogs. I think you have to have a private room, and there's an extra charge. But they will pick you up at A-Ball Bridge. You can stay at the hostel, and they do this for anyone, not just people with dogs, but it's very convenient when you have a dog. And then there's a kennel that they work with during the day. You can't leave the dog alone at their hostel, but there's a kennel that they will work with that you can kennel them during the day when you go back to hike through Baxter and then up Katahdin. So there are ways that you can make this work. And my biggest recommendation personally was I really wanted to just get off the trail myself, get a rental car, get an Airbnb, a dog-friendly Airbnb, and be able to manage all of that myself and not be at the mercy of someone else. Note on if you do that, Baxter has a lot of rules and regulations you have to follow. So if you go to the hostel, they'll take care of the various day permits and parking and things like that that you need to get back into Baxter. If you do it on your own and you have friends or family coming, you have to get online 2 weeks ahead of time and get those permits and passes. And I'm going to make a whole nother video, not even pertaining to dogs, just about the logistics of Baxter and getting home. All right, so number 8. I can count. Number 8, the huts and the whites. You do not have to stay in the huts in the whites. It's a big misconception. The only issue is the section that's the presidentials, because that's a 2.5, 3 day section to get through, and it's all above tree line. So there's no camping above tree line. So most people, if they're going to stay in a hut in New Hampshire and the whites, it's in that section that they'll stay in a hut. Lake of the Clouds is the most popular one because it's about halfway through the presidentials. This is where Mount Washington, Mount Madison, you hear about that section. Dogs are not allowed in the huts. And my personal experience was they were really, really rude and condescending about it as well. There's a lot of discussion in forums and groups and even in the comments and far out that the workers of the huts are just kind of rude to thru-hikers in general. Put a dog into that equation and not so great. I have heard that Lake of the Clouds has a basement that they do allow dogs. I have not verified that. I've heard back and forth on whether they do or they don't. I decided I'm gonna talk later about the service dog thing with Zobi, but Zobi technically is a service dog. He's a therapy dog, a psychiatric care. A lot of your national parks, your state parks, and affiliates of that have a hard time recognizing a therapy dog as a service animal. Seems like veterans with PTSD, like they recognize that, but like I have, I'm very prone to anxiety. I have an anxiety disorder and I'm very prone to anxiety and panic attacks. And I have chose to just not fight it and follow the rules of general dogs until recently. I had a panic attack on trail in Colorado after the AT, and Zobi was with me. And he did what he was trained for, and he was able to get me calmed down and breathing properly again. I was at 14,000 feet and couldn't catch my breath. I've actually blacked out from panic attacks before. If you black out at 14,000 feet when you're bouldering and you could tumble, it could be bad. So in the future, I'm probably going to fight about Zobi being a service dog. A therapy animal is a service dog. Point being to this was I chose not to fight the huts and the whites. So I slack-packed through the presidentials, which costs money. So again, back to the extra budget for having a dog. Had to get hotel, had to get shuttles. You have to pay a car fee to go up the auto road to Mount Washington. We had to do that twice. I did it with someone else, so we were able to split the cost, but it was still expensive. So that's how I got around the huts and the whites. The other option is to kennel your dog for 2 to 3 days while you go through the whites. Or the presidentials specifically. There are other huts before and after the presidentials, but there's enough camping and below tree line in areas, other shelters. You don't have to use the huts. It's just that section over the presidentials is difficult. The other option through the presidentials is there are a bunch of blue blazes and other side trails going back below tree line. So you can hike, go below tree line, and you're going to probably add a mile or 2 or more round trip to your day and the next morning to go back below tree line and camp, and then come back up to the AT and continue your way across the presidentials. All right, that was number 8. Number 9, we're almost there. Number 9. Kind of touched on this a little bit. Transportation back from Maine or wherever you might end up getting off trail if you are unable to complete your thru hike for any reason. Yeah. I'm going to talk specifically about Maine. Transportation back from Maine in Baxter is difficult. You are quite literally in the middle of nowhere. When you go through the 100-mile wilderness, you come out at A-Ball Bridge and you're at Baxter State Park. Like, it's all dirt roads. There's like not paved roads. There's not a town. Millinocket's the closest town and it's a half hour. Bangor is the closest city and it's over an hour. So it's actually an hour from Millinocket. It's probably about 2 hours if you're trying to go straight from A-Ball Bridge. So it can be difficult to make your arrangements to get back home. This is something that actually a lot of thru hikers don't realize, and then it becomes a discussion, and then a discussion after the fact as we try to warn future thru hiker hopefuls, like, hey, if you make it to Maine, just know that getting back home is not easy. So you got to get transportation more than likely into Millinocket or Bangor, maybe Portland. To fly from Portland or Bangor are your major airports with more major airlines that you're probably going to have a layover in, like Boston, New York, maybe Atlanta, because you're probably not going to get a direct flight back to wherever it is that you're trying to go. And if you have a dog and it's a large dog, how do you fly with your large dog? Now, if you have a dog Zobi size, I've flown with him many times. I have a bag that he fits under. I actually used my carrier that we used on trail. He fits under the seat in front of me. It was an extra like $125. Again, if it's a service dog, you're not supposed to pay it. Probably gonna start fighting that more. But so for me, I got a rental car because I wanted to spend some time in Maine after summiting Katahdin, so did some touring around Maine, and then I drove to Boston and took a direct flight from Boston to Atlanta, which is where my RV was, you know, in near Atlanta, near Springer, where we started the trail. So Zobi I've flown with before and I wasn't too concerned about that, but if you have a medium or large dog and you can't fly, or you don't want to fly with your large dog, then you're probably going to have to drive, which means getting a rental car or having someone, a friend or family member, come meet you in Maine, or maybe meet you halfway, or, you know, figure out your arrangements. But it's going to cost money. So you're going to have rental car or shuttles, hotels, flights. So you need to budget for that and budget extra for having a dog for your hotel, your rental car, your flight, all of that. All right, number 10, last but not least, and this is one that I actually am going to do an entire separate video on, so I'm not going to get into all the details and run my mouth the way that I can when I start talking about this. Number 10 is the AT is a leash trail, on-leash trail. If you're going to hike the AT with your dog, and I'm even going to say this, if you're going to day hike, section hike, or through hike the AT with your dog, have your dog on leash for so many reasons. My biggest fear with Zobi wasn't wildlife on the trail. It was other dogs on the trail that are off leash and don't have good recall. Everyone says, oh, not my dog. My dog comes back. I can sit here and tell you story after story after story from Georgia to Maine of dogs that were off leash that came after Zobi. And the confrontations that I had with their owners, I can think 3 especially pop into mind, but there were many, many, many more. One got ugly because it was a German Shepherd and was trying to attack me and Zobi off leash and did not listen to the owner recall. 3 dogs off leash came running into our campsite one morning while I was packing up. Zobi was still in the tent, thank God, and they were trying to get him through my tent. They actually tore the screen of my tent. Again, this is a whole separate video. So for your dog's own safety, keep your dog on leash. For the safety of other dogs, keep your dog on leash. And then for your dog's own safety with wildlife, if your dog is walking 20 to 30 yards ahead of you and there's trees and there's a turn and you can't see that bear or coyote or snake or fill in the blank of wildlife, moose in Maine, that your dog is going to go after, or the bear just decides that your dog is dinner. Like, I mean, things happen and they happen like that. They happen like that. Zobi is the victim of a dog attack, which was why this was one of my biggest fears on trails. He was already the victim of a dog attack and barely survived and honestly should not be alive today. And I'm telling you, the morning that attack happened, it was like that. I mean, Zobi, I thought he was dead before I could even get to him when that dog attacked him. So you just never know. And then there's so many other reasons because I can't even tell you how many lost dog flyers I saw pinned to trees from Georgia to Maine. So many. And there's stray dogs all over the place. So dogs being off leash, again, like there's stray dogs and the stray dogs aren't always friendly. And then just safety concerns with the actual terrain of the trail. Like, there are a lot of, you know, cliff type areas and, you know, rocky downs and ups and the rivers, and there's just so many areas where your dog could, you know, stumble or, you know, be not paying attention, go off after a squirrel or a rabbit or a bunny or whatever, and they're now down a cliff and you're calling search and rescue to come get your dog because you can't get down there to them. Like, it happens. So just please follow the rules and keep your dog on a leash for your dog's safety, the safety of others, the safety of other humans, other kids. Now, I will say, if you watch my vlogs, you'll be like, oh, but I saw Zoe off leash. There are some areas, and I referenced this very earlier on in the beginning of the video here. Some of those rock scrambles, particularly when you get up to New Hampshire and southern Maine, it's too dangerous for you and your dog to be tethered to each other. So make sure your dog has good recall. Do not let them get far away, but undo the leash, let them go down, you follow them down, or let them go up, you follow them up. And as soon as you're through that rock scramble, put them on leash again. All right. That is the end, I promise. All right, so I hope that you have found this helpful and informative. Please subscribe, like, comment. If you have more tips and comments, I would love to see them. I may do a follow-up with more tips and logistics of through hiking with a dog. And again, I am doing a full separate gear video, and we'll have that one uploaded soon as well. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye. Oh, Zoe, come here. Say bye.